So today we will be moving into our COVID-19 update per usual during this COVID response, and I'll call on County Manager O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, good morning. We're going to take a slightly different approach today to what we provide as the update. I'm going to turn it over to Director Hadeen to share the information and our speakers who are going to help us with that.
Thank you, County Manager O'Connor, and thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'd like to welcome up here Tommy Godwin, Kim Closey, Carolina Ramirez, and Mark Jackson. I'm delighted that they will be taking the pressure off of me this morning and actually highlighting the amazing work that's happening right now within the Public Health Department, within the incident command structure, to really dive into what's happening on the ground in our community, what the data is saying. I will show you some sample maps for us to utilize to help us understand how to continue to respond to COVID-19. We'll talk about and connect that to our community outreach and engagement, and then give you highlights of testing that we've been a part of and testing that's coming up in the near future. So the presentation will be on a PowerPoint. So Tommy, go for it.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Tommy Godwin. I work in public health as a planning manager, and my non-COVID work is to lead the planning and performance improvement team. And during this public health response, I've also been leading the case investigation and support branch in public health that does case investigation, contact tracing, and service to COVID positive residents who are isolating at home. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and speak to you about our data. I want to show you a quick outline. As Kathy mentioned, we're going to do some sample maps and data with you, talk about our community outreach work and testing, and then leave time for discussion. I owe a debt of gratitude to our county GIS section who helped with this work. We're always working out a lot of bugs in how our data works, how it feeds into our county open data portal dashboard, situation update, and how we can display this data geospatially while still protecting people's private information. You'll see on these maps that the distribution of COVID cases across Ramsey County is not uniform, and that combined with our understanding from statistical analysis not on the map, we know that Black, Indigenous, and people of color are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, as well as populations of low economic resource. A little bit about where the data comes from. This is from the case database that is administered by Minnesota Department of Health. The access to this database is shared by local public health agencies, and it's the database that contains case information about people who tested positive for COVID-19. The information we collect on these cases demographically comes from initial testing, so their address and name and usually phone number, and some racial and ethnic demographics are collected at the time of testing and submitted to the state lab. And then further information is gathered during the phone interview for those we can reach to conduct an interview. That work is shared between local public health and the State Department of Health, so our county residents are being called by people who work for the state and people who work here for Ramsey County. Then the data that you'll see on the map is collected by address and then geo-coded to an XY coordinate. We don't show you those points on these displays. We are aggregating them to census tracts right now as counts and as density per area. There's much more analysis that can be done, so I'll jump into the maps. And what we're hoping for from today's conversation and going forward is how to continue linking up the map displays with our statistical analysis we use on a situation update. So here is one view that shows you the density of cases in Ramsey County per square mile by census tract. The darker tracts are a higher density of cases. This is not normalized for population, it's simply case intensity per tract. And then displaying that slightly differently, you can see the circles here that show you relative intensity of number of cases over the population density in that tract. Here's a better zoom in of the legend of the increased number of cases and a little bit of color coding on the circles. I'll show you on the next, here it is with commissioner districts. So you can see the detail there of where we have a higher case incident in the county. Much discussion has been had about looking at where the populations live who are more impacted by COVID-19, and then looking at the cases themselves. This is a good moment for me to mention who's not in our data, and that is, as usual in the American healthcare system, people who have low access to resources or who may avoid testing unless needing to be hospitalized. So people who believe that they have manageable enough symptoms to not seek testing or medical care are not in this data. And this is, and then I'll go back to the maps that you're looking at. This is a simple overlay at this time. We aren't displaying the racial demographics of the cases on a map. So what you're seeing is case counts, all of the cases, laid over the population density per specific census demographic. So on the left-hand side of the screen, this is the percent population ranging from less than 8% to greater than 32% of people who are Black, African American in the ACS data as of 2018, with our cases overlaid. Similarly, on the right-hand side, percent Asian and Pacific Islander in the census data with our cases overlaid. I'll caution against, from a statistical perspective, correlation and causation. This is truly just a context piece at this point, and we can continue to do deeper analysis as our response continues. These are the last 4 race and ethnicity slides or the last 2, pardon me, of race and ethnicity slides, where you see the distribution of Hispanic ethnicity, again by census data, and tract, and then percent white non-Hispanic on the right-hand side of this slide. We've begun the conversations about putting the vulnerability analysis and putting these kind of weighted factors that create higher vulnerability to COVID-19 and economic insecurity and hardship on the maps. These are 2 looks at some of that data. There are many more options for that, which we can continue to explore with the GIS analysis and with my planning colleagues in public health. So on the left-hand side, the color intensity is the presence of low-income housing, so it's a number of units, and then again, keeping the case counts overlaid on that context. And on the right-hand side, it's persons without insurance. Also, this is all census data still from the US Census American Community Survey as of 2018. Okay, heading into just one quick thing about the data before. So the maps you're seeing are a point in time. It's all of the cumulative cases up to about July 16th while we paused to do this analysis. To continue the work, we'll have to keep working on our workflows to do the regular updates. And we'll just take whatever guidance we get from you all on that. Moving forward, there's been work both in public health and at the incident management team level to map the context of medical assets, including testing sites, hospitals, pharmacies, urgent cares. And so this is one look at that map with the cases distributed. And then a preview of some work that the IMT planning section has been doing in partnership with GIS to add the context to our to a web GIS map about where testing is taking place and other medical resources. I'll leave the rest of the testing map to my colleagues who are speaking about that section. So just what's next for us then is to move forward trying to link together the dashboard and situation updates and statistical analysis by demographic group with the mapping context and really put those side by side as much as possible. If at some point we have a large enough number of cases, we can do that in limited fashion also within the geographic context. So we'll keep working on that. With that, I'll hand it over to Kim Closey for community outreach.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Tommy. Commissioners, I'm Kim Closey, and I am in...
Excuse me. I'm sorry. I couldn't unmute quickly enough. But before we move on, there are a couple of hands raised, likely on the last presentation. I want to check in with Commissioner Ortega and then Commissioner Maz-Castillo. Thank you. Same difficulty, I'm sure. Okay. I know you're gonna come in right when I call on Commissioner Maz-Castillo, but let me go to Commissioner Maz-Castillo first, and then we'll go back to Commissioner Ortega. Commissioner Maz-Castillo.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Tommy, I love the maps. They're very helpful to get an idea. I'm wondering if we have that same map overlay related on current cases or active cases, because I think that's the totality of cases since the start. And since we know that people recover, do we have that for current active cases?
Thank you, Commissioner. The short answer is no.
Okay.
The longer answer has to do with calculating the isolation period for cases. So people who get a positive lab test and then the moving time window of 10 to 14 days worth of cases. Frankly, with the total daily numbers that we get right now, distributing it, they're low enough that distributing that on a map is not a very realistic thing to do. So we could light up maybe a zip code, but even I'd have to look at the data. I think the counts are not high enough to even do a zip code level distribution if we only talk about who's currently infectious or contagious with COVID-19 and not yet out of their isolation period.
Great, thank you. I guess in some ways that's good news that our numbers aren't that high that it could do that, but it definitely would be a way to track hotspots. But thank you very much. Great work, Tommy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure, but I believe that Commissioner Ortega has indicated no question. Is that correct?
Right.
And thank
Correct.
you. Then I will move on to Commissioner Reinhardt and then Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you. Well, as a longtime advocate for the use of GIS data, I was really pleased to see that it's so much more obviously than just maps and street addresses and so forth. It is really about how we can make really informed decisions. And I know that the GIS folks often do not pat themselves on the back for the work that they do. So I appreciate the fact that you started out with that as well. Again, data. We need data to be able to make the best decisions moving forward for everyone in Ramsey County. And some of that was not shocking per se because we've been getting updates. But when you see it on a map, it's much more tangible, I guess, to really look at it and say, wow, there's a huge difference, and we've known this. So I appreciate the fact that you have put a lot of work in, obviously, to getting the right information for people in GIS to track and to use those maps. And it's going to be interesting also to see over time how those change. So thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner McDonough.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I want to reinforce good work. This is really helpful. And not so much a question, but really truly a comment and observation. it saddens me that there's really no surprise here, because we could take the history of any public health issue or any chronic disease and do the same work, and we're going to get the same results. We've talked about the social determinant of its health. We've talked about, zip codes predicting your health. And I think, as we continue to evolve what our conversations are, what we do as what's important for us here in Ramsey County, I mean, the fact is this is just a racial determinant of health. And it doesn't matter what we track, we're going to get the same maps that you showed us today with COVID. And we've got to start calling it out, and we've got to start addressing it for what it truly is. And, recognizing that there's social determinants of health was a step in that direction. Recognizing that your zip code will determine your health was a step in that direction. But the fact is, it is a racial determinant of health. And I just want to call that out. I want to recognize the work that you guys have done to help continue to reinforce the inequities in our system so that we can continue to do better for our residents in Ramsey County. Thank you.
Thank you for reinforcing that message, Commissioner McDonough. I have no further hands up, and we'll go back to the presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as we transition to Kim, I'll just add on to Commissioner McDonough's point. And yet, while there should be no surprise to this, many of our leaders who are presenting here today and our department head continue to sit in statewide forums where surprise or consternation at the information in front of us remains a reality that we need to continue to break through. And so as leaders here in this community who say this isn't a surprise at this point, and it shouldn't be, any help you can continue to have to reinforce that message on a regional and statewide and national level, we will continue to do our part. And I want to thank these folks here for doing theirs, and we appreciate your support.
All right, Kim, back to you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for having us here today to present. My name is Kim Closey. I am in Healthy Communities in the Public Health Department. In my non-COVID role, I work with a lot of grants, and I work with the Violence Prevention and Authentic Connections program. Under the COVID response, I am the branch lead for the community outreach team. So we actually started with one team of community outreach way back in March, and since then we have developed and evolved into 3 teams, and so we've divided them as you see on the screen. We have a team that focuses on the Hmong and Karen community. We have a team that focuses on the Latinx and East African community, and then we have a team that we affectionately call everything else. It's African American, youth, older adults, public housing, and violence prevention. Altogether, we have 23 staff that have been redeployed to work on these teams, and they come from all different areas of public health. I want to call them out. We come from Healthy Communities, the WIC department, which is Women, Infant, and Children, Environmental Health, Child and Teen Checkup, Health Protection, and Family Health. Among those staff, we speak 6 languages: Hmong, Karen, Spanish, Somali, Oromo, and Amharic. Most of those folks have been deployed at about 50%, so they still have regular jobs that have to get done in addition to the COVID work. What we do as an outreach team, we reach out to people. We reach out to our existing contacts and new contacts as they come up. We provide prevention and education information. We create and review materials. Our team does a lot of interpretation review and approval. Some of the materials are listed here on the screen. We work to promote healthy behaviors. We're not an enforcement team, but we are an education and a promotion team. And we connect people to resources, whether it's public health or housing or food, whatever else the county has to offer. We like to make sure that people know of all of the things that the county can do. And we respond to inquiries. We get a lot of inquiries. Some of them are quite unusual. Some of them are always, where's my mask? Can I get some PPE? Do you have any hand sanitizer? That kind of thing. But we're constantly responding to people's questions. Lots of different ways that we do it. We do it electronically. We are all really good at using Zoom all of a sudden, or MS Teams. We do a lot of newsletters. Our team has probably, we have a Hmong newsletter, an aging newsletter, public housing announcements, violence prevention action team newsletter. The reach is more than 300. The information goes out weekly. We have regular connections with district councils, public housing, chambers of commerce, churches, businesses, all kinds of agencies. And then we do virtual events. We have done presentations to Ormo community leaders. We have done a presentation to Sprockets. We have done a Train the Trainer event with local imams in which we presented talking points, and then they turn around and take those talking points and send it out to their connections, which is hundreds of people. We have regular staff. We have staff that show up regularly on radio shows. We have Hmong Radio and Latinx Radio. We have a social media. One of our Karen staff posts videos on Facebook. She's done nearly 30 of them. And literally the reach is tens of thousands of people that have seen it and hundreds of people that have shared it nationwide and worldwide. And one of the things that we do then also is go out into the community. We've been to local markets, focusing on ethnic and cultural markets, providing information there, giving them signage and posters to put in their stores. We actually we're giving them the floor decals to say stand 6 feet apart. We've reached out to housing, different apartments and low-income housing areas. We've reached out to child care providers, home-based and adult daycare providers in the Hmong community, providing information about best practices. We've had events at beaches. I think Kathy mentioned that at the last meeting at McCarran and Phelan. And then last weekend, we went to a soccer event, and that's what these photos are from, connecting with people, engaging folks, and giving them information. We do community outreach at the testing events. We've been at Jimmy Lee and Harding, and then we will be at the next two that are coming up, which are the next presenter will talk about. For the ones that are coming up, we're going to be focused on pre-registration events. So we'd like to go to where people are, like Hmong Market and other areas where people already are convening, and get them registered ahead of time. Show up with a laptop and talk them through it and show them how it works. We develop educational materials a lot based on whatever the need is. The most recent one that we're working on is what to expect when you get a call from the contact tracer. If you get a positive test, you'll get a phone call, and that takes people by surprise sometimes. So we want to give them the information ahead of time so that they know and are ready for it. We work closely with many community agencies. We promote and advertise the events and through the radio shows that people are on, through social media announcements. And then our staff is on site at the events. We serve as greeters and registration people and traffic control, and our staff often serves as interpreters. So who do we reach? Lots and lots of people. We reach out to lots of agencies and businesses. There are individuals that will call our staff members. Our staff are trusted leaders in the community, and people come to them and with all kinds of questions. Some are related to public health, some are not. They connect people and they help navigate systems, and they provide support and resources. We collaborate with other state agencies. We work with multi-partner networks. We connect with medical providers. We work with other departments and units within Ramsey County. We've been working with human services and congregate living providers. We work with lots of other branches within the incident command system, testing, contact tracing, essential services, the Medical Reserve Corps, and quite heavily with communications. You guys are familiar with RESERT. That's the Racial Equity and Community Engagement Response Team. And you know that their purpose is to advance racial and health equity to create effective community engagement. And we overlap with them, and we partner with them in some areas. And so one of the things that the RESERT team has done is they have made grant awards into these two different areas that you see on the screen, the trusted messengers and the media messaging. So what our role was in that is we announced that funding opportunity to our networks, and some of the people that we've been working with actually were awarded the funds, and now they're doing the work. We are actually having, we're calling it a lunch and learn, even though it's going to be virtual, so you have to bring your own lunch and eat it by yourself. But we're going to have a lunch and learn with those awarded agencies and our outreach staff, so they can learn about what we do and we can learn about what they do, and so we can better serve and support each other in moving the work forward. And I just wanted to lay this out because there's some questions sometimes about what's the difference between outreach and the research team. And so I really think that outreach is, we're extending services to folks, we're responding to requests, and the engagement is long-term, bringing people in, inviting them to participate, and bring together, create something new, so. And then what's next? It's always changing. We are tracking the incoming requests for testing events. We get phone calls and emails all the time saying, can you come to my apartment building? Can you come to my agency, my workplace? And so we're starting to track those, and so we can make good decisions about where we go based on the data. We're responding all the time to changes that come from the state and city. Every time the governor has a new executive order, we have to adjust what we do. And we wanted to make sure that we're basing our actions on the data, which you just saw from Tommy. So that's it. I will turn it over to community testing unless there's questions.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you very much. I do have a question from Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much. This is just really exciting how you're reaching out to the community and working with our trusted partners, and it's just crucial that we, of course, let our community know what we're all doing and bringing our services to them. Can you talk a little bit about how we're engaging our cities in Ramsey County and you know, maybe our legislators? I know that you're working with district councils and things. You know, we have city newsletters and we have legislators do newsletters all the time too. So I'm just wondering how we can be helpful in getting our other elected officials within the county knowing about this work so that they can spread it out there as well. Because, you know, we want to be good messengers of all this great work, and I know they would too. So just if you could talk a little bit about how we're working with our other entities in Ramsey County, other levels of government.
Yes, actually, we are the community outreach liaison team, and there is a city liaison team as well. And so that's it's a whole nother team. And so they connect with their city leaders regularly. They attend the weekly meetings with Ryan, I believe. And so they have direct connection with city leaders.
And if I could follow up, could we get a list of who they are? I mean, yes. I'd love to see who they all are, and if we could get a list, because I'd love to connect with the liaisons in my cities, just so we can make sure we're, you know, sharing all the great information and really helping be that. So sure. Just you can send that maybe up to all of us as who those liaisons are.
Sure.
That'd be great.
And we do have regular meetings between the combined liaison teams, so we know what they're doing and they know what we're doing a couple times a month. So, but I will get that list to you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. If there's no other questions,
Commissioner, I'm sorry.
There is. Okay.
McDonough, please.
Yep, thanks. I do have. No, thank you. This is really thorough and amazing work, and you guys have just done super job here. But connecting everything that you laid out back to the first presentation on where everything is, and it was hard to tell, but it looked like a couple of the biggest areas of concentration were in our public housing in McDonough Homes and Roosevelt Homes. I could be wrong, but it looked like, from the best I could tell from the map. And I'm wondering, and then you did mention in your last comments there about working with apartments, you're getting calls from apartments, they want testing there. But actually, you know, working with where those concentrations are, which probably for the most part are public housing or big apartment complexes, and are we working with those owners, those landlords, and public housing to actually get right into that area where they live, rather than trying to connect with them at Hmong Market or Hmong Village and hoping they're showing up there or hoping they're showing up other places, but actually going to right where they live? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. We've done a variety of things around housing. We have one staff person who actually works with public housing through her regular job under the SHIP grant, and so she is our liaison and our connection to public housing. And she's been involved in providing education to them, as well as food distribution and formula distribution events, that kind of thing. We've been in contact with Common Bond, who owns several housing units, and they have lots of messaging in their buildings. We offered signage and postings and that kind of thing. And in relation to particularly Skyline, what we did is we worked with the the building owners and the security guard there as well, but also we then went to the markets in the immediate area, and we created a half-page piece of information that we call the bag stuffer. And so then we gave it to the markets, and then they can drop it in people's grocery bags and send it home with them. So it's information, it's in English on one side and a different language on the other side. So people know the basics of hand washing and distancing and some basic information and getting tested and that kind of information. So it's a both and. It's working with the property owners and the people that are living in the buildings and also the surrounding areas.
Perfect. Thank you. Good work.
Thank you very much, all. And we'll go back to our presentation then.
All yours.
All right. Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Caro Ramirez. In my non-pandemic response role, I'm very lucky because I'm an emergency preparedness specialist for health protection, and it coincides with my response role as a community testing branch director because my main mission is to plan for and execute testing sites. And for me, my happy place is a 16-hour shift at a testing site in heat and cold. I don't care. That is my happy place, and I would trade that instead of being here doing public speaking because I'm super nervous too. Okay, and so I'm gonna just jump into my first slide. But before I address these, I just want to maybe take a few moments to define some of the types of testing activities that we are doing. And so the first one is community testing. And community testing is basically testing provided as a result from a defined ask from like a specific community for that community with input from that community. So it's a very collaborative effort. Then we have mass testing, and mass testing is essentially a high-capacity, large-scale testing operation where we don't screen for symptoms and we don't screen for exposure. That, I would say, is what we did at Jimmy Lee, just big operations. And then the third type of testing is targeted testing, and targeted testing is where we use data to help us identify outbreaks that are happening or could happen. So this would be like a meat processing plant, specific location, specific target. And so with those three in mind, community testing and mass testing and targeted testing, what our testing support branch is kind of aiming to do is a combination of community testing and targeted testing, where we are not only responsive, but we are receptive to requests from the community to do testing, but then we are also using data from Tommy's branch, Kim's branch, from our data managers, so that we can find ideal locations where we are being basically responsible and accountable to our residents, but we are also being responsible with our resources, primarily like test kits and staffing for these events. Any questions on the definitions? They're kind of just being developed. Any questions? Okay, I will move forward. And so on this slide that you're looking at, so we have two sites at local public health. So our county has had, I would say, a support role in the first two at Harding High School and Jimmy Lee. And then the planned community testing sites is where we are taking on more of a leadership role. And so we'll describe those.
Ms. Ramirez, you asked 4 questions, and there are a couple of hands up.
Oh, okay.
I have Commissioner McDonough and then Commissioner McGuire.
I was slow on getting my hand down. I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on that map that you've got up there, so you said you work with communities and communities can request. So like I'm looking at New Brighton, which is the northwest corner up there with some bigger circles too. So I'm just wondering, so would New Brighton need to reach out to you and say, we'd like to be a testing site? Or I'm just curious how, as an example, how that might work. Because we've got, an area up there that may need testing, but I don't know if we approach them to say, do you want us to be, or do they have to come to us? Just if you could talk a little bit about how that might happen.
Absolutely, great question. So we are still in the process of developing a framework that is fair. It would be unfair for us to only rely on partners who have access to our outreach team or our team. So we're trying to use the data that we have in collaboration with our partners. So I guess in answer to your question, it's still something that we're developing together.
And just one more piece, if I could add on top of that, Commissioner McGuire, Director Hadeen made a direct ask a week ago Friday to the cities with their CARES money to build mobile testing capacity within our cities across the county. And so that ask is out there, and I would encourage you to continue to encourage New Brighton, based on the data you're seeing today, to take us up on that offer, to be a part of a collaborative effort to expend those CARES monies in a way that deploy mobile testing resources into the field across the county.
That's great. That's great to know. So I'll talk to my cities and encourage them to do that. Thank you.
Keep going? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to my next slide. So our testing support branch came about, as I mentioned. MDH reached out to local public health departments, and so we were one of those lucky sites. And so they asked for our participation in staffing their site at Jimmy Lee. And so we were at Jimmy Lee for about 6 days, starting June 9th through the 24th. And the first day of operations, it was more of a trial. There were a lot of moving pieces, different partners, and so our department was basically the operations of it. We were developing the work, the flow of the layout, the staffing, the training, and so that first day we were running maybe 200 tests, and by the end of that afternoon we kind of found our rhythm, and so the next day we tripled to 600 tests, and by the end of these operations we totaled 6,000 participants who were able to get their testing needs met. And so out of these 6,025 clients, there was a positivity rate of about 2.3%. So I'll invite Mark Jackson here to help me out.
Thank you, Carl. I'm the Deputy Director of the Testing Support Branch. I'm a COVID-19 Program Specialist for Public Health, and up until now I've mostly been working with the homeless population in the COVID respite. So in a more focused, Jimmy Lee was quite a broad site. As you can see from the photo there, we had 4 tents, and drive up, I think at our max day we had 1,500 cars, 1,500 clients actually. So the next week we actually stepped it down a little bit, and we supported the Native American Community Clinic at their essentially walk-up site at Harding High School. You can see in the photo it's a much smaller scale. In 4 hours, we saw 237 clients, and our positivity rate was slightly above Jimmy Lee at 3%. And so you can see the different sizes that we're capable of supporting. So both sites were done in close coordination with SEOC, as Carl mentioned, Minnesota Department of Health, and the actual labs. The lab support is done at Mayo, so these tests are actually shipped down to Rochester. And then, of course, with Medical Reserve Corps of Ramsey County, we had a lot of volunteers who were critical in making this happen. MRC is still supporting, and as we speak, supporting Open Cities at their drive-up appointment-only location in Midway, Dunlap and University. Some of the issues that we identified with the drive-up testing, I wouldn't really call them barriers, but they were something we hadn't quite thought about, and that would be access to a car. The timing of it, the Jimmy Lee sites were basically 9 in the morning or 10 in the morning until 6 p.m. So if you're at work all day, you may not have been able to come over it, and that was on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So we're looking at changing the dates, moving those to the weekend to get a different profile of folks who are able to access testing. And then improvements can be made. We particularly started this at Harding with the advertising and the promotion of this, and we hope that will lead to a better turnout in future events. So we're going to continue to work with our state and local partners to kind of replicate Jimmy Lee, but just at different sizes, different scales, depending on the neighborhood where we're trying to focus. And now that we have the mapping data, that becomes much easier for us. We definitely don't make this testing exclusionary. It may be focused on a certain group or certain neighborhood, and we can tailor that with Kim's group in our outreach. And by pre-registering people during outreach, we get a better sense of logistics that helps us coordinate with our partners, request the correct number of tests, avoid running out at the end of the day, things like that. And then our approach is in line with the Lieutenant Governor's 5-point plan, particularly points 1 and 2, which is to broaden access to community testing in their trusted community sites and meet people where they are. and also increase our testing by federally qualified health centers. So I'll give it back to Carl now.
Excuse me, let me just call on Commissioner Matas Castillo, who has her hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. See, I've been participating in many conversations with community about how to do this outreach best, and the issue around both cultural and religious beliefs and testing and how testing is done has come up quite a lot. And so I just want to make sure that we're also taking and hearing that information from community about, there's some religious beliefs and cultural beliefs about whether to get tested, what happens if they get tested, and then also addressing the issue of there's been a lot of confusion with people getting tested and then receiving a bill. And of course, those aren't our testing sites, those are other testing sites, but just to make sure that we're addressing that confusion in any of this outreach and really going into and being invited into spaces as opposed to us asking them to come to us. So just more of an observation and sharing of information.
Thank you. I don't want to pass up the opportunity to respond. I do have a question from Commissioner McDonough, but I'll go back to the presenters first in case there's any response there.
Thank you. I'm actually addressing that in our next slides, I believe.
Okay.
So site selection. So for
We'll hold. We'll hold.
So for
Commissioner McDonough.
our
Yeah, thanks, Chair Carter. Are we limited by the availability of test kits in any way, or how close are we to the capacity in our ability to actually test in the community? How much more aggressive can we get in with the planning that you guys are putting together to actually do more testing in the community and testing deeper into the community? And at what point do we start getting worried that we don't have enough test kits and some of the capacity issues to be able to actually follow through on testing?
Commissioner McDonough, at this point, we are being assured by Minnesota Department of Health that they will support us in our needs for testing kits. They are still not getting to 20,000 tests a day across our state. And so at this point, we should be able to be supported with the amount of tests that we need with the planning that we've created. And this team here has been communicating with the state emergency operations centers, testing command center routinely to ensure that we have what we need to move forward. But thanks for the question.
Thank you. And so we'll go back to the presentation.
Thank you. So hopefully this will address Commissioner Matascassio's questions. So site selection, there is this quote that I read in a book once that says, "Nothing about us without us." And so in planning these testing operations for the month of August that are tailored for the Hmong and Karen communities based on that community requests from those populations to the outreach team, what we did is we set up a preliminary meeting just here internally with Ramsey County, and we brought in the outreach team who were the people who heard first accounts from these communities, what they wanted. They wanted testing operations. And so using some of the members from the outreach team who are deeply embedded in their cultures and their communities, we identified 5 potential sites using their feedback. And so the sites identified for the Hmong and Karen communities were the Washington Tech School, Johnson High School, Aldrich Arena, Phelan Rec Center, and the Community School of Excellence. And so our Hmong American Partnership, some of their members contributed to the last site location. And so based on that, Mark and I were tasked with actually going to each of those 5 sites and doing a logistical assessment for doing a hybrid model where we can accommodate drive-ups and walk-ups, where we can have enough space that we can accommodate education stations and resource stations so that we can have navigators on site that can help people enroll for insurance, that can help answer questions, that can help answer those questions. What if I'm COVID positive? What if I need a letter from my employer? What if I need resources at home if I am sick, etc.? So that's what we were looking for in a site, large enough to accommodate resources for the community. And so it just happened that Mark and I identified Washington Tech Magnet School and the Aldrich Arena as our top 2 sites, but we kept that to ourselves because we wanted to hear back from our partners. And so while we were doing all of that work, Kim and her team were engaging the community. So they were using surveys via social media platforms, in-person surveys at churches, I think was one of the sites. What else would you? And just, yeah, direct feedback from partners. And when we got together again, just internally, it turned out that those partners and the community had identified the same sites that we ranked as 1 and 2. So the meeting after that was a meeting when we brought in all of our stakeholders. So we brought in mHealth Fairview, we brought in the Korean Organization of Minnesota and the Hmong American Partnership, and we presented some of the information that we are sharing with you today. How we came to these locations, how we want to make it not just no barrier. No barrier, I think, has been defined as not checking for immigration status, not checking to see if you have the insurance to pay for it. But for us, no barrier really means that if you don't have an appointment, we're not going to turn you away. If you have a language need, we are going to help you on site. So we are there for you. And so we share that with our partners, and they agreed that Washington Tech and Aldrich Arena were the ideal sites. And so from then on, we presented possible dates. We explained our rationale for having a 6-hour testing operation. We explained that traditionally we have it on the weekdays, but they countered that they wanted weekends. And so we are listening to them so that we can make it accessible to their communities. And so for the months of the weekends in August, we're doing weekend operations, Saturdays and Sundays. And I kind of outed myself during one of those meetings because I was saying, we can probably start early and end later. And they were saying, no, we have to go to church. And I said, oh, I just outed myself. I don't go to church. And so basically using their feedback, we are setting up these testing operations to meet their needs. And so I guess it's just how it also coincided that these two sites, I believe is Washington Tech is zip code 55117 and Aldrich is 55109, and so these two sites are in those communities that are experiencing high positivity cases. Yep, that's what I heard. Anything to add?
Both sites are on transport.
Oh, thank you.
Public transport.
That's right. So both sites are on a bus line to make it also accessible to and it's open to everybody. So even though we are focusing on our Hmong and Karen residents, it's open to everyone. And our outreach efforts will communicate that also. And so, like I mentioned, the first two sites that we did at Harding and at Jimmy Lee, we had more of a supportive role. So moving forward at Aldrich and Washington, we are taking on a leadership role. And so we're using our experience from those two sites to basically guide us in how we can increase our capacity as quickly as we can, as efficiently as we can, to run small-scale and large-scale operations, and to run them quickly if need be based on the data that we're getting. Ideally, to kind of predict where an outbreak might be happening and for us to be more responsive to those sites. And I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, so as Carl mentioned, we're learning quite a bit from those previous sites, and those are informing our planned sites. These are the ones we've mentioned so far, by no means these are all happening as we speak, but in the background, all the conversations as we try to expand to different locations are happening. So yeah, again, using the maps and identifying partners with Kim's team to target all those areas that are of concern. So we're in discussions right now with Open Cities, who we already have a relationship with, to expand their testing and move into mobile. And then Minnesota Community Care, we also have a relationship with them, and those talks are in the early stages. We have initial conversations with Clues, but we do have an urgent need to start expanding testing in the Latinx population. And we are very much open to a wide range of testing locations, sizes, and community partners. And again, in collaboration with our teams here. So
Madam Chair, with that, we'll stand for any questions that you may have. I want to thank all our presenters again, Director Hadeen, all of Public Health. We wanted to do this dive into our work across the various areas of outreach and engagement, how we specifically are thinking about mobile testing, how we're trying to use data and continue to refine it. Kathy and I realize that we've spent many weeks talking at you from our perspective, and that hearing from some other voices might be helpful to this work. And I just want to thank everybody who is continuing to give all of their time and effort to the COVID response, which is nowhere near the end. And as we head into the fall, a pretty scary time. But thankfully now we have a few months under our belt, at least from which to build, and additional capacity coming online through these community-based testing sites, and the additional investments that the county is going to continue to make in that space with our CARES funding to ensure that we can be as responsive as possible as we go forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this comprehensive and broad update on the work that's going on in our community. I really appreciate all who've been here to share with us. And I do have a couple of hands up, so I'll go immediately to Commissioner McDonough and then Commissioner Castillo.
Thanks, Chair Carter. Great work, and I really like how you're connecting it to the data and then building in the community outreach and then building that plan based on that community outreach, and it's excellent work. The one area that we didn't talk much about, and it may not show up in the data, is what are the approaches here working with our sheltered and unsheltered homeless population, because they may not be showing up in the data on those GSI maps. And that population, of course, we know is certainly very heavy in people of color. And but what are the conversations around ensuring that we're providing access to testing and engaging with those two populations?
Madam Chair and Commissioner McDonough, today was a presentation for our community testing and how we're moving that forward. Testing in our congregate care settings and homeless care settings and the respite center have a different set of guidelines. And so with our respite care and our connection with Minnesota Community Care and healthcare for the homeless, we actually connect with them through that process to ensure that our homeless community also has testing needs as appropriate and based on symptoms as well.
Yep, Madam Chair, if I could follow up, and I appreciate that. That's and that's the response to kind of the sheltered, right? The ones that are showing up at Safe Space or Higher Ground. How about the unsheltered that are not showing up at a congregate space in our community, right? They're a part of our community, and they certainly are in our community. What are we doing there to make sure that we're staying on top of the testing and the engagement piece with this community?
Thanks for the additional question. We have staff within our 555 Cedar Clinic who actually go out into community and respond to sexual health needs, but they and others who are in community who are working in partnership organizations with our homeless population work with us to help us identify people who we can help respond to. So we have different methods and different ways of making sure that we hear about and provide resources to people who may need them.
And
Thank you very much.
if I could just
Go
add
ahead.
one last piece on top of that, Madam Chair, which is, I think what you're hearing is we're doing our best through as many means as possible, but if you want another reason why encampments are untenable and an inhumane way to think about protecting people and broader community as a whole as we go forward, the protocol around congregate sites is far more prescriptive and far more effective, quite frankly. And I think this is another point to why we need to keep pushing for dignified shelter options for everyone across our community.
Thank you for underscoring that point.
Yeah, well said.
Commissioner Castillo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for all this really great information. I'm really excited about the expanded test sites, and especially at Washington Tech, because it is a great location in my district. And you're starting testing on my birthday, so I'm excited to volunteer for my birthday with the testing sites, because that's such a great opportunity. I also wanted to just share, I was on a call yesterday around the need for testing in the Latino community, and the Mexican consulate was very eager to volunteer their space. So you might be tracking that, but wanted to put it on your radar. I do have one question about what are the turnaround times? We're hearing different information about turnaround testing. Could you just address turnaround times on testing?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner. For the tests that are where the test kit is provided by the State Department of Health and submitted, the turnaround is really fast. It's probably, it varies, but it's 2 or 3 days in terms of tops, in terms of the lab result. And currently the combined workforce of case investigator contact tracers are keeping up with that, so that as soon as the lab result is posted, that person is getting their first attempted call that same day. So from the time you go to the testing site to the time that a contact tracer might call might be anywhere from 2 to 4 days.
Thank you very much. Commissioner McGuire has a question or comment. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just thanks again for all of this work. I just want to highlight another area, and just if you wanted to talk about how we're connecting with our schools, or is that a different liaison? Is that a different group that's working on that? Because this is the community outreach, so are you reaching out to our, you said we have city liaisons reaching out to our cities, so do you have school liaisons reaching out to our schools is what I was wondering about. And just wanted to put in a plug for our Ramsey County League of Local Government, for who's ever reaching out. You know, they're a group of our cities and school districts and other entities that are working within Ramsey County, and they would be helpful in getting communication out as well. So I just hope that we're accessing, you know, existing organizations to help us with this communication. So just curious, are there school liaisons as well, or just talk a little bit about how we're connecting with our school districts, because they're working with our families regularly now on food distribution all summer and in the school year, of course. We'll see what else they're going to be working on with our families.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, schools, you know, we do not have a set of defined school liaisons would be the simple answer to the question. It's more nuanced than that, obviously. The food distribution work is aligned with our food and basic needs work. You know, the schools are clearly focused on the build up to this Thursday's decision by the governor around what the fall is going to look like in public schools across the state of Minnesota. I think I'm probably your school liaison right now. The superintendent and I spoke late last week and again early this week, and continue to be in close contact as we coordinate. And for example, our last conversation focused the most on technology needs at home and how to think about leveraging the work happening in the county to think about technology, which we've talked about with all of you some in the past, and the overlays into schools and how they are thinking about and approaching that topic. So I think right now, if nothing else, it's an administrator to administrator conversation happening. I know that they are fully consumed by the meal delivery and trying to figure out their contingency planning for the fall, but rest assured we remain in close contact.
And Commissioner McGuire, in addition to that, on the testing end and the contact tracing and case investigation end, I suspect that schools will be similar to like long-term care centers, where the Minnesota Department of Health will have a cohort of people who will be connecting with schools to deal with any school outbreaks, and we would be support in that instance.
Thank you for that. Thanks for that information.
Thank you very much, Nicole. I'm sorry, Commissioner Fretham.
Thank you, Chair Carter. I'm just wondering, last week you had said that our testing positivity rate was at 8.4% in Ramsey County. I'm just wondering what change, if any, we've experienced in the last week.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Fretham, I don't have updated data as of right now around positivity rate. I would suspect it's around the same. The data takes a while to get to us, and so I'm happy to follow up with you. I would suspect it's still around 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, somewhere in that range.
I believe that is all the questions that I have, unless I see somebody raise their hand at this point. I want to go back then to the presenters and allow you to complete your presentation.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to the steps that we're taking to take a look at data, to take a look at how we engage community and outreach, and then how we're looking at testing moving forward. We appreciate this, and I want to thank Tommy and Mark and Caro and Kim, as well as Laura Anderson, Gina Pistolka, and Kathy Filbert, who are also here, and they lead the operations section of our incident command within public health, who then leads the work that was presented to you today. So thanks for the opportunity today.
Once again, thank you so very, very much. It has been quite a comprehensive and complete presentation of how you're doing the work out in our communities, how you're outreaching to the community, and providing our plans based on that information. So we appreciate it. I want a quick check-in with Commissioner Matas-Castillo in case there is a final question. There is not. All right. So once again, thanks for the COVID update. I'll check in with County Manager O'Connor as we wrap this one up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just do a real-time schedule check with you, my ask would be if we could have 5 minutes to transition into the Health and Wellness Service Team presentation and move folks around. We'd be back at about 10:30. And because this was a pretty comprehensive conversation that went a little longer than initially planned, I just wanted to flag for you now, if it is of interest to you, we have some of the day on August 11th. We have a relatively light board agenda. So if we do not complete all of the Health and Wellness Service Team presentation, what we could do is bring some of it back to still get everybody out by noon today, as I know schedules are tight.
That is very helpful. Thank you very much. I know that it will be fine to take that 5-minute break. We'll do that right after a brief moment of silence, as we know that we are still in very, very trying times, and we want to recognize the issues that still exist within our community. We'll take 30 seconds for that moment of silence, and then we'll break. Thank you for the moment.